Welcome into another edition of CBT Now, right here in the CBT Automotive Network. Some likely surprising news from a recent J.D. Power study. EVs cost less to own over 5 years compared to gasoline cars in almost every U.S. state. I know I don't have to repeat that, right? Because some of you just fell on the floor. Here now with more on this report is Stewart Stropp, who's the Executive Director for Electric Vehicle Intelligence at J.D. Power. And thank you so much for joining us on the show, Stewart. Very much appreciated. I know that there's probably a lot of people out there, dealers and managers, and maybe even some consumers that peek in every now and then that just said, what? I thought we all hated EVs. I thought we're trying to get rid of EVs. This is our nemesis out there. And now you come in with this report and tell us that it costs less to own in almost every state. So elaborate on these factors and tell us where the cost savings is.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. Thanks very much for having me
Sure.
on. And yeah, it's been pretty remarkable, these findings. As part of our larger EV Intel data set that we've been collecting, of course, we are calculating and tracking at this point on a monthly basis this total cost of ownership, or TCO, number for EVs, and then we're comparing that number to comparable gas vehicles, so that, to your point, we can get a real good real world read on how feasible these EV products actually are for everyday shoppers out there. And yeah, it's been really interesting to see that, despite what we all know, which is that for the most part, EVs are going to cost more upfront, right? At this point, generally they're carrying higher transaction prices. Once you start to factor in all of these other cost elements in that TCO equation over that ownership window, we look at it across a 5-year window for purchase transactions and then about 3 years for lease.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting to see that, for the most part, it does kind of flip the script in terms of which technology or which product type ends up being more affordable in the long run. And a lot of that is, as you can imagine, is driven by incentives, everything from federal to state. Utility incentives, OEM charging incentives.
Sure.
But then also there's those key differences in operating costs, right? In terms of electricity versus gas is a big factor too.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. And I think everybody kind of knew some of this anyway, even though
Right.
many of us want to put our head in the sand about EVs because we don't like them so much. And, or at least that's the perception out there among dealers and maybe some OEM executives now. But I think we kind of knew that, it's probably going to cost less to operate this. We heard that it's going to, not require as much maintenance in the dealer service department. Obviously, you're passing by gas stations where gas is $3, $4, $5 a gallon in some states. And so I think in the heart of hearts, we knew that, it's going to cost less. However, we also thought that all of that cost savings was going to be absorbed and gone because the cars cost more. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, that is certainly true in terms of, again, we're still at a point, relatively early part of the EV market, if you will, where, we've got product that's hitting the market. In a lot of cases, it's really only offered at the very high trim level, trim option.
Mm-hmm.
And then over time, as production ramps up, start to kind of expand that spectrum of trim options and price points accordingly. But still kind of coming out of that phase, and yet we are still generally at a point where that upfront transaction price is going to be higher, and it really kind of speaks to the opportunity that we've got in the industry, and at least in terms of trying to sell these EVs and, get this product out of inventory. How we really want to try to change the discussion with shoppers around financials away from just that upfront transactional amount or that traditional monthly payment, as
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about for, decades.
Yeah.
At this, and shift that more over to this total cost of ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Way of viewing the cost, because again, particularly in the case of a purchase transaction, we've got a full 5 years to offset that upfront transaction price difference with operating cost savings and again, incentives and the like that are unique to EVs at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You end up kind of coming out in favor in a lot of cases, as you said, really in most parts of the country, on the EV side of the equation at this point.
Yeah. What's because we mentioned in almost every state, What's the most affordable state for owning an EV compared to gasoline cars currently?
When we did this study that got the coverage out there in the media, it was really focused on the first quarter, and it was focused on purchase transactions
Hmm.
specifically. And at that time, New Jersey actually popped up as one of the most affordable places
Hmm.
to buy an EV relative to comparable gas vehicles. Now, since then, of course, actually in July this month, they are doing away with a long-running, decades-running sales tax exemption.
Mm.
That was a key part of that equation in New
Okay.
Jersey. They're also introducing an EV unique registration fee, so that's going to move New Jersey down that list of a little bit
Okay.
in real world terms.
What
Yeah,
was
yeah,
the second one down then? Because they may take first place now, right?
right, sure, yeah. Some other states that were right up there, Colorado.
Mm.
Uh,
Okay.
pretty sizable EV incentive that's in place for shoppers in that market. They've got pretty good share of the retail market as well, fully electric accordingly. Nevada, Illinois are
Hmm.
also, offering pretty
Hmm.
uh, impressive EV TCO numbers at this point.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Like Colorado makes sense because they're very focused on, the environment out there, and people have got that mindset. So that makes sense. Chicago, that's a little surprising to me, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And maybe this, I don't know if this could come out in the study. Maybe this is just an opinion since you're so close to it. But why do EVs still only make up a small percentage of new vehicle sales, despite their cost advantages?
Right. It's a great question. And I think there's a number of factors that come into play there. One is, to a large degree, kind of what we talked through in terms of TCO, right? I think for the most part, a lot of shoppers and other stakeholders in the EV space aren't necessarily really talking in terms of TCO that much yet. I
Right.
think we still have a long way to go in terms of trying to change that narrative.
Sure.
And to that end, the opportunity to educate consumers about EVs is as big now as it was when we really started diving deep into this data a few years ago.
Yeah.
When we ask new vehicle shoppers how comfortable they are in terms of just understanding how these EV incentives work,
Sure.
north of 40% of shoppers tell us they really don't understand how they work. And to some degree, that's understandable. A lot of these incentives are pretty complex in terms of
Yeah.
the eligibility requirements, and
Definitely.
it absolutely. But what's the key takeaway behind that number, though, is and really, I guess, the ROI in terms of retailers, other stakeholders, dedicating resources to helping customers understand this stuff, is shoppers who say they don't have a good understanding of incentives. Only about 5% of those people are very likely to even just consider buying an
Hmm.
electric vehicle.
Hmm.
But these shoppers who say they have a strong understanding, north of 60% of them are
Hmm.
very likely. It is a wild, obviously more than a 10x jump in terms of
Sure.
purchase consideration between those two polls. So
Hmm.
it really kind of speaks to that big opportunity we have just to educate customers. Is one of those key parts of the EV proposition, where we could do a lot to kind of demystify what buying an EV is all about. That is holding a lot of people back at this point.
Right. Right. It's interesting. I asked you that question, and range anxiety wasn't one of the answers, but yet it seems as though the media would have you believe that that is the number one reason that people are staying away from EVs is because of this range anxiety. Oh my gosh, I don't want to be stuck on the road. My battery dies. What am I going to do? And what? Talk to me about that.
It's a great point, and that certainly is still one of the key points of rejection that's holding a lot of people back. We do this new vehicle shopper study every month, thousands of responses, and yeah, charging station availability, i.e., range anxiety,
Yeah.
is still generally right up there, one of the top reasons. So that is still something that absolutely needs to be addressed, and it's interesting. We are seeing progress in terms of how many charging outlets are being installed across the country, and yet we've still got a way to go at a market level in
Hmm.
terms of closing that gap to the growth of the EV park itself. The park itself is actually outpacing growth of the charging growth about 2x
Mm-hmm.
at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to close that gap, get more chargers out there.
Yeah.
But some of that as well still kind of speaks to the opportunity we have to make sure shoppers really are understanding the charging part of the equation. How much, generally speaking, a lot of these EV owners are charging at home. It's roughly 85% of charging is actually taking place at home at this point. So
Okay.
that long haul vacation road trip to
Yep.
grandma use is totally valid, but it's definitely the exception to the rule in terms, relative to everyday commute type use case.
Sure, sure. And then you've got the situation where you've got multifamily dwellings, apartment buildings and such, where
Absolutely.
it may not be as convenient to buy one because you don't have the benefit in many cases as charging your vehicle at your home. If you're in a condo setup or you're in an apartment or something like that, right?
No question about it. That's where we probably need to see the most progress made in terms of setting up public charging infrastructure is to help consumers in those living situations, multi-unit dwellings, and so on.
Sure.
Try to better ensure that they've got some access to public charging overnight at their home or at least at their place of work.
Mm-hmm.
To address that part of it for sure.
Do you have any numbers on the people that are driving EVs today that will have a propensity to buy their next vehicle as an EV? Are there any numbers on that?
Yeah, sure. So we've definitely, I know there's been some other studies out there recently that kind of indicated a lot of people who have made the electric leap are kind of looking to go back. In the data that we collect. We've been doing it for several years now, particularly in terms of this study we publish twice a year around the EV ownership experience.
Mm-hmm.
We're collecting feedback in partnership with PlugShare to find out what it's really like to own an EV, how satisfied or not are these people
Mm-hmm.
with that decision. And we have consistently seen in that study, in terms of their intent to buy another EV, it's very far on the likely side of the equation. 90+% of these EV buyers, roughly, are looking to go into another electric vehicle. So
okay, that's pretty high. That's pretty high.
Yeah, it's quite high, and
Yeah.
and it's been in that range pretty consistently as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole notion of, once they go electric, generally they won't go back.
Mm-hmm.
That tends to hold up based on what we see in the data.
Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks volumes about the idea of owning an electric vehicle. I mean, if you saw the reverse of that, where 90% were saying, "Oh, I tried it, I'd never do that again," well, that's going to send out the bat signal to consumers to say,
Exactly.
I don't want to be one of those. But with that kind of a high rate, that sounds to me to be one of the greatest stories to be told. In addition to this study that you've got at JD Power, how can dealerships better educate potential car buyers and EV buyers on the long-term cost benefits of EVs? What's the best way to get that information out?
Yeah, absolutely. What we've generally see is that those two really, I guess, low-hanging pieces of fruit would be information and experience. And on the information piece of it, a lot of it does relate to helping customers understand this TCO equation in particular, and also obviously incentives.
Mm-hmm.
And there are calculator tools out there. ZappyRide is certainly a great resource among others that sales consultants can use with customers to walk them through what TCO will look like way beyond that upfront transaction. What is my real world cost going to look like? But in terms of experience, this is another really important opportunity that we've seen consistently in the research. Is we've still got at this point about 44% of new vehicle shoppers out there who are telling us they literally have had no experience ever with an electric vehicle. They've never even touched one. They've sat in one. And the reason that that's important is when we look at the percentage of those people who say they're very likely to think about buying one, which is in the single digits, about 8%.
Mm-hmm.
And we compare that metric to people who haven't owned one or leased one, even just test driven one, literally just sat down in an electric vehicle the consideration among that group is about 24%. So you've got about a 3x jump.
Isn't that something?
Right there.
Wow.
It's amazing. It really speaks to the opportunity to demystify these products for customers once they get in one and experience the performance and the technology, and it affords retailers the opportunity to demystify these other things too, like charging and TCO and so on. So it's, getting them in the product is absolutely key. It's a huge opportunity still at this point in the market.
That's right. So, and I say, to follow up on what you just pointed out, less than 5% of salespeople today that are in showrooms, new car franchised showrooms, less than 5% own an EV. So they're not driving the EV. They don't know that much about the EV, even though they're supposed to. I ran car dealerships for 25 years, and I know that what a salesperson's supposed to do and what they actually do is two different things. So they gravitate to the ICE vehicle that they know so well and they've been selling for years. So much so that there's been so many situations where customers will go into a showroom and say, hey, I'm thinking about an EV next go around. You don't want an EV. Consumers don't want EVs. There's not enough charging stations. Let me show you this ICE vehicle over here that I can sell you, quickly and I understand it better. So and I've been saying this, until we win the hearts and minds of the salespeople on the showroom floor and on, online that are taking care of consumers online, you're not going to move these things at any great quantity. You've got to get salespeople on board to take those customers and say, that's great news. Let me tell you all the reasons you should consider and in fact buy an EV on your next vehicle. And that's just not happening right now,
Yeah, I mean, that is it's a huge point, and it's spot on. And the EV is a new technology, not just for shoppers, but for sales consultants as well. Right. I mean, sales consultants are people too,
Right.
And it's new for all of us. And I've heard great best practices out there with some of the retailers we interact with in terms of, having customer facing personnel in the store take EVs home and, to experience what it's like to drive an EV, own and charge an EV yourself for a week or two. And to your point, it could be an absolute game changer in terms of how confident they are selling these things.
Yeah, in fact, it is. I've spoken to a number of GMs where they've actually told me that those sales associates that drive an EV as their personal car do sell more EVs. So it's like there's your unofficial study right there. What does that tell you? Right. Sales associates that know EVs and use them every day in their everyday life and are sold on the concept will sell more of them. It's no kidding. That's you got to get them behind the wheel, right?
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's crazy. Stewart Stropp, Executive Director of Electric Vehicle Intelligence at J.D. Power, and most electric vehicles are very intelligent, which scares the hell out of me. But I want to thank you so much, Stewart, for stopping by CBT News. I know that our dealer viewing audience will get a lot out of your study and your presence today. So thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Jim. Great being with you.
You too.